order. Karen, can you please call the roll?
Yes. President Furman,
Present.
Vice President Curry, Alder Bennett,
Here.
Alder Conklin is excused, Alder Figueroa Cole,
Here.
Alder Foster,
Here.
Alder Heck is excused, Alder Abbas is excused. We have quorum, but just barely. So everybody stick around.
Thank you, Karen. Since we do have a registered speaker for today, Kimberly, if you wouldn't mind reading the script.
Okay. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video for purposes of quorum and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders, committee members, and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Also, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the body, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Thank you. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just let the record reflect that Vice President Curry has joined us. The first order of business will be approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Seconded by Vice President Curry and moved by Alder Foster. Any comments, questions, concerns, corrections for the minutes? Alder Bennett, was that to help second it, or do you have a comment about the minutes?
Next time I'll just unmute myself to second.
Yeah, that's fine. I will accept that next time. Thank you, Alder Bennett. I appreciate your help. All right, seeing none, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to assume approval by unanimous consent, and I'll move on to the first agenda item, which is public comment. Agenda item 73628. We do not have any general public comment. We do have public comment for item number 4 and item number 5. We actually have registrants for item number 4, and then we do have public comment for item number 5. And when we get there, we will have those individuals speak. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is disclosures and recusals. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Members of the body, if you have any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code, please let us know now. Not seeing any, so we move on to our agenda. The first item is for items to be considered is 73629, a legislative upgrade update. We are fortunate to have Director Edgerton with us today, who is going to give us an update on what's going on with Legistar. So thank you so much for being with us today, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Of course. I was joking with staff that I should just have my own agenda item. IT updates, but we don't need to actually do that. Okay, so let me get my PowerPoint up here. Okay. All right. So thank you for having me tonight. To talk about the Legistar upgrade update. We, as you may recall, have had money in our budget for several years. It's about $350,000 to do an upgrade. And when we first talked about doing the upgrade, the intent was that we were looking at replacing all of Legistar, and then we soon realized that it probably would just be better to upgrade our current Legistar and then start adding on modules that we have not used at all. Just to give you a little bit of background on that, we were, I think, the second to last city in the Granicus customer base that was still on premise. And the reason why was because we have so many documents that were being stored that Granicus had first, had quoted us quite a high price for storing all of those. But by the time we actually went to the upgrade, they did it for no cost. So now we are cloud-based, cloud-hosted, and are now starting to do a lot of the upgrades. So the goals of our project, and I'm going to tell you, a lot of this is coming straight from the President's Work Group to review the communication tools and processes, because, quite frankly, they're great guidelines. And so I think it really helps us as we're moving forward. And let me just go through here. So one of the big things is we want to continue to provide better tools for both city staff, or for all three, for city staff, council, and residents, for public legislative input. City staff, there are certain tools that we have identified that we think would be more useful for them. Council, there is the iLegislate, which we think would be a really great tool for the council, and there's quite a few others. And then for residents, more of the opportunities to provide input, throughout the agenda as we're going through our legislative process. We also, the electronic public comment improvement proposal that came from the President's Work Group is a really great document for us to start to look at as part of seeing how we can integrate that. And if there are tools within Granicus that would help to support that, there is a suite that they have where you can create your own forms as part of that. So we're thinking that might be part of what we would do there. And then, of course, since Legistar is such a huge tool for the Common Council, making sure that you are part of the decision-making process as we procure tools. And Alder Foster is on our committee as we're moving forward to do this in our movement forward with this project. So the first project is replacing my commit with their boards and commissions, which is just a simplified board management for local government. And I think that the key piece to this is that it's one system rather than the systems that we have today, which are three systems. So we have the MyCommit legacy system, which is a old progress system. It's one of the very last ones that we still have up and running. And in fact, we have a project that we are trying to get all of those legacy systems off of progress. We no longer want to pay for the support for that or the maintenance. So we'd really like to get that completed. And then we also have the Legistar Vacancy Report, which is in fact in the Legistar suite right now today. And then we have the Microsoft Word application for applying to be on a board, commission, or committee. So we have three different systems, and we have one person that is actually overseeing this. So that's Lila DaCosta in the mayor's office. And so she has to do input into all of these systems to produce the reports that are asked by Common Council, by Civil Rights, by the mayor's office, by many different folks. And we would like to streamline that for her. So on the back end, it's a streamlined version for her. But then on the front end, we would also like to address the disjointedness as well. So this is the future state of the boards and commissions. This is the city of San Jose. And I just wanted to give you an example of what it looks like. And the really lovely thing with their application is that you can go to the vacancy report, you can see how many vacancies that there are on whatever committee, commission that you want to apply for, and then it immediately takes you to the application. And the applications, and I'm just going to move you through so that you can see this. On the left-hand side, you see profile, demographics, interests, and experiences, the supplemental verification. And then there's also a save and submit, which is pretty exciting. But the key piece to this is that these applications are for the individual board, commission, and committee. So as you see here, this is for their Housing Community Development Commission. And they are asking questions that are specific to that committee or to that commission. So we can be doing that as we're moving forward with these. And the other opportunity that they have is that they can apply for multiple different commissions and committees on one application. And this gives you an example of that. And then they have far more robust demographic information. We are very excited about that. This was something that we had been working with Granicus over the years when they were Daystar, and then they were bought out by Granicus. This was something that the city of Madison shared with them several times, that what they had for demographics was really quite unacceptable. So we're excited to see how much they have expanded this. This shows you this example of the different applications for the different multiple boards. And as you can see, this is the other piece that I wanted to demonstrate, is that this is also not what you see is what you get out of the box kind of form. These forms are specific to the city of San Jose. So these can become specific to the city of Madison and what we need that applies to our city government and our ordinances. So then what's next? The next thing that we've been talking about is a digital records management software system. We're actually trying to do that almost in parallel with this one. We're really interested in that. We get a ton of records requests a year, and we'd like to get this so that there is an online application, that we have a better tracking system. Right now, it's sort of siloed across the agencies, and we want to be able to do it so that it is a much better experience, both internally and then externally for those who are requesting. And then we want to explore and either purchase or turn on, in some cases, more of the Gov Meeting and Agenda suite of tools. So there's the real-time agenda editing and collaboration tools, which we need to look at and figure out how that would work, and if this is something that the Common Council is interested in, and Mayor's office, digital minutes, the instant digital vote capture, and then the feature that I was talking about, the iLegislate, which I think really we can just turn on from what I understand, but it's just looking at that and making sure this is something that we want to do. And then exploring even more, there's some other systems that they have that we're interested in, but one that I'm noting here is the customer relationship management system that they have. I think that's a really interesting one. Kind of ties into the 311 piece, but is a little bit different, but I could see some connection there, some bridge there. So those are the places that we are exploring right now. But really where we are is we've been working with Lila DaCosta on the boards and commissions piece. And her timeline, we are meeting with her at the end of September. As I was noting earlier, it is just one person who's working on that. And so, she only has so much time to really focus in on this. And so we're hoping that we can get going on the project last quarter of 2022, and then moving over data in 2022 and 2023. But these other pieces of this, what we were hoping to do is start working with Karen and look at what are the next steps of what the Common Council is interested in.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah? Alder Figueroa Cole, go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. This is great. So do you have a timeline on when are these things going to take place?
So for the boards and commissions, we're working with Lila. So Lila has to help us establish that timeline. We're doing our first big meeting with her at the end of September. We've already done the review with the vendors and looked at that with her. The records management system, we're actually hoping to have that completed, or at least the contract completed in 2022 and getting that moving forward. The other pieces, that's working with Karen. I've been sort of holding off until Karen's more fully staffed. Yeah, so, and then Karen and I can sit down with Zach Commons and Leslie Sarcheski from my team to talk about timelines and what would be next and what we're looking at.
And, you know, like I like to use my blog to kind of help people navigate some of the systems. So I already had a blog out there about Legistar. So would you be like putting sessions out for the public to get educated, or would that be something that we as a CCC have to schedule? How would that work? How that would look like?
You know, I don't know. I think that's a question that we're going to have to explore with Karen and with the and I can't remember the name. It's the legislative. What's the resolution? What's the work group, the administrative work group? I can't remember the name of it. Is that the name of it? Yeah. It's been a long day for me too. So anyway, I think that the administrative work group working with Karen, she's leading that, and we can figure out how we want to address that. There's also the Common Council website is being redone as well. So I think that there's going to be some incorporation there with the new blog tools that are coming in with that.
All right, well, thank you. I'm looking forward to all those changes.
Thank you, Alder Paulson.
Yeah, I just wondered, is Granicus able to interface to any of the single sign-on sort of things, or is this going to be a new account, or kind of where are we at on that? And I know there's a giant single sign-on project out on the horizons list, but there are some existing accounts. Well, I have to admit, I have not used my City of Madison account for a long time, because when we got married, the dog licenses and those things got divvied up to Ben, and so I mow the lawn, he gets the dog license. So.
Yes, not this system. We are not looking at that for this. So the Granicus system as it is today, there is like a login if you want to get alerts for when agendas are published, when minutes are published, that kind of, when there's any kind of action on a committee, commission, board. So I don't think that that would be the system that we would look at, but we are certainly looking at that. And like you said, there is that Horizon project. I also think that there's probably opportunity with the financial system with Tyler for a single sign-in with that. We're looking at a common customer file, and we've also been thinking about how we can have that intersect with a 311. So I think that this is kind of that big picture. I would love it too, Alder Paulson, because we too have several different accounts with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Foster.
Thanks, Sarah. Great update and great project. It's really neat just to see the different opportunities laid out and how they're really in different areas of administration and of city work, but all really promising. I think I would just emphasize from the kind of Alder perspective, and I believe from the public perspective as well, that ability to get the written comments onto legislative items and to have those comments follow items through our robust committee system. And I appreciate you calling out that recommendation from the communications work group, but from my perspective, I think representing the kind of broader council perspective, that one is would be such a huge win for both alders and public. So very much available to help and figure out. Maybe Karen has capacities to have an initial conversation around that. I know we're recruiting for the resident engagement specialist, which would help as well on this, but I think getting that conversation started and seeing what we can put together for a timeline would be just really, really awesome for the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I also want to echo, thank you so much, Sarah, for this. Really appreciate getting that update. And I too am very excited to see us start implementing some of those additional functions. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which has to do with district reports. Trying to actually pull up a district report to give people an idea of some of the past topics. Legislative item 73630, there is an attachment that the media team sent Karen a few months ago asking what we'd like to do with district reports. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with district reports because we've got a bunch of new alders and it hasn't been going on for a while. But the idea behind district reports was it was a talk show that had alders on it and other community people. And some episodes people viewed and others episodes people didn't. And so I guess there's a thought on going forward. Is this something that we want to see the IT team spend time on? Is this something that we as a council would like to contribute to by being guests, by helping promote, et cetera? Sarah is here to probably can answer some of the questions about it. And I can try as well, but I want to see what CCC members' thoughts are on is this something that you think is valuable to restart up, and if it is valuable to restart up, certainly would be curious in what people thought were good topics and good reasons to have it. So any thoughts? Not everybody at once, please. Alder Foster.
Yeah, I mean, I like the forum, just another channel to try and have kind of conversations about what's going on in the city. I think what's probably what might be more interesting is really being clear instead of it being like district reports, it being more topic based. And I think it's nice to have alders participate. I think it'd be great to have alders plus, city staff. So we could have a stormwater one or whatever. I mean, and there's a bunch of PIO officers that could probably help, pull something together, have a parks one, have whatever, maybe alders that serve on those boards could join the conversation. So I think that might be something that just might be of more interest and might, as compared to the district reports. And a lot of the ones I've seen, the alders end up talking about the things that they're interested in, which are citywide issues anyway. And it's just like, oh, here's what alder from district, whatever, has to think about citywide issues. So it hasn't felt like, I think the geography focused part of it would be good to reconsider, but it'd be great to, and maybe scaling, I don't even know what the frequency was and what the burden was on production, et cetera. So, I don't think it has to be super frequent either. It would be, better to do maybe fewer and more interesting topics than trying to just find stuff to talk about. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Director Edgerton, what was the frequency? I'm sure you remember.
I do. I used to have to do them. They are every other week. So they fell along with the council meetings. So they were usually the Monday before. And it was generally on topics that were going to be at the next common council meeting. And it's about an hour and a half production and about an hour of pre-production and probably about an hour of post-production. And I don't know how many crew now it would take because we have more automated cameras, but I do believe that has been reduced in size. It's not a huge lift for us.
But it is, I mean, we have asked so much more of the media team since district reports have gone offline.
Yes.
And so, I mean, is there, I'm putting you on the spot. I mean, is there like, I think every 2 weeks is a big ask of all parties involved, whether it be alders or, the media team, et cetera. Is there like a pattern that maybe you want to come back to us because I'm putting you on the spot, like, once a month, every other month? I mean.
Well, we used to have a show. It's called Madison Works, and it was quarterly. So they did it basically kind of on the seasons. And then it had, different pieces to it. I mean, it was a very produced show, and I don't think that that's what we would want. But I certainly think that if you were to do it maybe every 2 months or to do it quarterly, have one focused around the budget, perhaps looking at if there are times when the topics are of bigger interest that you would do more. But I certainly think quarterly would be good. The thing that I think is interesting now is you now have your resident engagement staff member too. So there might be more opportunities there when looking at this. So it might be something that you don't obviously make decisions today, but moving forward, as Karen is figuring out what this position is going to be doing, this might be another outlet for that as well with working with the alders.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's helpful. Alder Foster.
Yeah, I was actually thinking something on that last bit about it would be like as an alder, like I don't think I ever got asked to. I mean, it ended relatively soon, I guess, but having like a schedule and having that schedule sort of owned by the council office and resident engagement, et cetera, where there's some thought that goes into okay, what do we what are the topics of interest and checking with alders and really I think trying to meet that that connection point because I think we are really well situated to know what residents are asking about, what would be interesting to them. I like the quarterly too, and I don't think they have to be high production value, but maybe using some of those kind of saved resources from doing it so frequently, more in the like, I think we could easily cover 4 topics and have them be tighter things and then just being able to slice those up and have here's a 5-minute or a 10-minute or whatever it is conversation on this topic that one recording session and you can watch the whole thing, but we could also then have links to kind of those conversations on topics because I know I hear from residents when I have those sorts of things to share in the blog, they like those and they can kind of choose, okay, I'm not going to dedicate an hour to this, but I can here's a 10-minute conversation on this thing that's interesting to me. So I would definitely be in favor of scaling back on the frequency and just investing, I don't think it'd be a ton of effort just to bookmark and split apart those videos kind of thing. But I think that would be really, and those are things that just can be shared over social media and, connect to homepages and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be really interesting to look at.
And Alder Foster, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Like when you talk about, not too much production quality, or not jumping through too many hoops, that type of thing. I mean, District Reports really was just a sit-down talk show where they sat across each other, and talked. I think that's probably what you're thinking as well in the future, right?
Yeah, I'm saying don't need to add any more production on that side of things, but more on the sort of post-production, just sort of
just indexing it. Yep.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you, Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. So are there links for some of the ones that you guys made before? Because I never heard of this, so I cannot offer an opinion. And I just read the memo from Joe. He questioned also the viewing data, which was being low. So if you have links for it, I will appreciate it, Chair, and then I can take a look and perhaps email an opinion on that regard.
Thank you, Alder Figueroa Cole. Sarah, with the city does have a bunch of podcasts, right? So that's one of the newer things that a bunch of departments are doing. Without saying this podcast gets this amount of viewers or anything like that. I mean, has that been a successful effort, or and is that something that maybe we could think about being, an alternative to this at times? So, engineering is doing a show. They maybe we do it monthly because we'll feature an engineering show one month that they're doing already.
Yeah, the podcasts actually have been pretty successful. And any show that is done is also turned into a podcast. So just so you know that we also make sure that happens. Same with the meetings, et cetera. So, but yeah, I think they definitely are something that people listen to. We could pull some stats. We were just talking about that with engineering's podcast for some stats on that. If you'd be interested in that, I can ask Boyce to share those with you as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, thinking about, taking advantage of things that are already happening might be an interesting way. And so that could even just be, somebody in the council office going, you know what, engineering just did this. And that is such a great, helpful thing. Let's make that a district report. Let's put that out and let's share that. And I also don't think, and alders do a good enough job of promoting the fact that all this stuff is available via podcast. So certainly we'll, as we get more resources in the council office, make sure that we're doing a better job of letting people know that if they wanted to on their morning commute, listen to an 8-hour council meeting, they can. Alder Paulson, go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of wondered, what is the, if we didn't go back to district reports, just what are we not doing? Or if we go back to district reports, what do we stop doing? Because I think given past viewership numbers, I think I'm more interested in great media team support for future hybrid committee meetings. And so I'm just worried about resourcing here.
You want me to answer that? I think this was for me, Alder Paulson, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Just wanted to make sure before I talked out of turn. So as I was noting before, it's not a huge amount of time for us to do district reports, but any time that we can bring back and use for something else, I like to save resources. So I'm all for that. Yes, we would have opportunities for other hybrid meetings. Those would be those type ones. So, at this point, we have the staffing to do the hybrid meetings if the committees and commissions are interested in doing hybrid. We have not really heard of anybody besides the Common Council who at this point is interested in moving to a hybrid model. And there's certainly other work that the media team can do. They do, not just meetings. They also produce quite a few educational videos, public service announcements, language access videos. I mean, they have a plethora of different services that they are supporting. And, quite frankly, I think that there is a backlog on production because of having to do so many virtual meeting support over the last 2 years, 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder Foster.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think just listening to the conversation, and it's been a good one, it really does seem so key to a kind of broader resident engagement strategy. And so I think for this one, really wait until we get that individual onboarded and having this be on maybe the short list, Karen, of things that they start thinking about early, have some conversations, with you, Sarah, and get sort of some of the background, and then maybe come back with what their, some options or recommendations as well. It seems like we're close enough where we should probably, not try and jump the gun on that. And then in terms of resources, I mean, I think what I remember hearing really clearly from TFOGs is that our board committee commissions is really not a significant place of resident engagement, and that it's like maybe won't be like we should make it better, but my interpretation, we shouldn't sort of lean too hard on our board committee commission meetings as our like primary resident engagement. So to me, like trading potential like sort of true resident engagement, if we could, if we can come up with the right way to do it for sort of meeting coverage. To me, they're kind of two different things, and I'd like to leave the door open and resources available to really think about how do we get good and important information out to residents in the best way. So I think hearing from our future resident engagement specialists would really help us.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you. And I do want to note that I'm very lucky to manage an incredibly creative team with the media team. And I'm not saying that because they are on right now. I would always say that they pudding is in or the proof is in the pudding, because they win numerous amount of awards every year for their work. And so I think that we would also want to engage them quite a bit in this, because they always are very creative in their ideas of how they can help to serve and support all of you.
Absolutely, definitely second that. And so I think this was helpful for us to understand some thoughts now and understanding what the resources look like, and know that the path forward is to engage with our new engagement person when they start and try to figure out something that I think we all agree we don't want to tax the media team too much, but we certainly would love to take advantage of their creativity and do a good job of engaging residents using fantastic resources our city has. So thank you so much, Sarah, for participating in this discussion, and thank you to CCC members and other alders. This was good. I think we know that we're not starting it back tomorrow, but we know that there's a path forward for continued discussion. So thank you. All right, if there's no objection, I'd like to move on to the next item on our agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to 68427, continued discussion about referendums related to TFOGs. We talked about this a few meetings ago, and it seems like the thought was that we were going to continue to discuss the idea and focus really very much on that 4-year term question. Alderman Foster has prepared a discussion for us tonight to think about some different ways of doing 4 years, and wants to see if we can get some feedback on what people think about different ways to slice it. So, Alder Foster.
Thanks, President Furman. Is somebody able to pull up the spreadsheet?
We can work on that, but why don't you start by explaining?
I'm not hearing you. Okay, now I heard.
Sorry. Somebody can pull that up. I don't know if Karen can't get it. I can get it in a second. But why don't you start by explaining some of the things that we're going to think about before we see that crazy spreadsheet?
Very good. I like to blow people's minds first and then try and explain it. So yeah, I think that everything, basically, as President Furman said, pulled together what I thought were sort of the most logical possibilities for how we would stagger or not elections for alders if we move to a 4-year term. So currently there are 2-year terms, and they're not staggered. Every 2 years, every seat is open for an election. The school board, for example, does stagger theirs, right? It's not every time that a school board seat's up, not all the seats are up at the same time. So my sort of an initial thought is that staggering is a good thing for the council, and that's based off of, basically, if you don't stagger, you would have less often, you would have a greater turnover, right? So if we move to a 4-year term with no staggering, that means every 4 years, all 20 seats are up, and it's much more likely that we have something like we've had the last 2 elections where about half the council turns over and is brand new. And I was part of one of those classes. A bunch of folks here were part of another one. It's happened before in Madison. It's not super common, but in my opinion, it's really tough for an institution like the Common Council to weather that big of a turnover. I think we just don't have enough in place really to support alders yet. There's a lot of ideas, and we're working on stuff, every day, but it's just, in my opinion, a really fragile institution. And when you have half of the council turnover, it's just really difficult for us to do the work that I think we can do. So that's sort of my starting point. I'm just putting it out there to be clear about it. So my starting point was the way that you could get the furthest away from that is to have 1/4 of the council seats be up each year. So 5 seats every year, which then in that case, your maximum turnover would be 5. Even if half of the seats turned over, that's only 2 or 3. And it could be, only 1 seat. And so in my thinking, that would help bring some stability to Common Council work. So that's what you're seeing on this first one that's up, is basically every year a core of them. I did color code that first column there. And basically what that's representing is, we could do this very completely randomly. But I think there could be some benefits to really mostly to sort of press and engagement around elections if we grouped things geographically. So this is just one idea of, you could have the sort of north and east side districts up one year, the far west another year, the kind of south and west another year, and the central isthmus the fourth year. And I think that would at least help give some coherence to which seats are up. So that's what you're looking at right here. I think the other big consideration for this is elections happening at the same time that the mayor election is happening. So there's generally a much higher turnout for a city election if there's a mayor's seat up as a compared to when it's just alders. So there's, in this model, you would have one out of those four groups, or 5 out of the 20 seats, would be running the same year that the mayor is running. So theoretically, or assumedly, would have more sort of press and engagement around that, have higher voter turnout as compared to the other 3/4 of the council. So that's something we can talk about. I've thought through it a lot, and I guess my opinion at this point is I don't think it would have at least not a known significant effect on sort of what kind of candidates would win in those elections. So I've kind of landed at thinking that's not super important. You want to go to the next slide?
I actually didn't share another slide. I didn't realize that there were multiple pages to print.
That's just the first, just the one. I could probably do it. Can I screen share?
We should be able to make that happen. Are you able to share?
Yeah, it looks like it. Let me just find it here. Okay.
Alder, you muted yourself. Alder Foster, we can't hear you. Try now, Alder Foster. Now we can hear you.
Yep. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's a new Zoom thing that mutes me when I screen share. So what you're looking at is, so this would be half of the seats, 10 of the seats 1 year, and then 2 years later, the other half. So every 2 years, there'd be aldermanic seats or alder seats up for election, and up to 10, maximum turnover would be 10. Half of the council would only be 5, as compared to half today is 10. So that kind of splits the difference. And then the second question is sort of alignment or misalignment with the mayoral election. So you can see on the top line when the mayor elections are. In this one, I just proposed, instead of having half the seats aligning with and the other half not, actually just having everybody not on that cycle. And so there's different ways you could do it, but so you'd have a mayoral election, and maybe then the next year you'd have half the council, 2 years later the other half, and then the next year mayor again. So that would be sort of option 2. And then I think the third option is to not stagger them at all. Maybe an obvious one would be to have them all aligned with the mayoral election, and then you could also do no stagger, but have them be a separate thing. So have a mayoral election 1 year, and then 2 years later, all the council seats, all the alder seats are up, and then 2 years later, the mayor again. So I think I'll stop sharing. And I know I just kind of ran through that quickly, but I shared my opinion kind of throughout that. I'm really interested in what others' thoughts are. I think we don't have to have a throwdown debate right here, right now. I think we can, I'm interested in putting forward something that seems like something that people, can get behind, but we, once it's introduced, it would get referred back here anyway, and then we'd obviously have a debated council. So there's plenty of time to kind of think through things, et cetera. But if anybody's got any immediate thoughts or reactions or preferences, would be great to hear them. And ultimately, I'd like to get something introduced into that process so we can have a more thorough debate and make a decision of whether we want to move forward with any binding referendum to change from 2 to 4, and if so, which version of that the full council thinks is the best choice.
So Alder Foster can tell you there are a lot of different ways to cut this pie, and so I appreciate that he came up with a few for us to talk about, and I'm interested as well in hearing people's feedback. Alder Paulson.
Yeah, I think staggering is just a super low-hanging fruit that we really need to do. In fact, if we did nothing else but staggering, even with 2-year terms, I don't know if we can do that without going to ordinance, without going to referendum or not. But I think we should stagger, even if it's half the council every year. That would be a benefit over what we've got today. Because I'll just say, as a new alder, it was super helpful to have 17 of you with prior experience, or I guess 18 of you with prior experience to be able to call on instead of potentially having to deal with that with maybe half or even more turnover. So I think staggering is really important. The mayoral election is one big turnout, but the other big turnout in the spring is the presidential, and we've always been able to sort of avoid that. And I don't know where we would time this if we're still kind of always on the, if because we're doing 2 or 4, we're still always on the odd years. We're always avoiding the presidential. That's one thing. But I think instead of 4 years, I actually think 3 years is kind of the right fit. And I don't know if we want to have that debate. I think 4 years is just a little too long, and I think 3 years is a nice sweet spot, bigger than 2. So it's not you're spending so much time learning, coming up to speed, and then we're right up against having to make it. I think 3 is a little better, but then you're also not, when you're thinking about, am I going to run for re-election? Oh my God, I'm going to sign up for 4 more years of this. It's just a little easier to say, oh, I'm only signing up for 3 more years, or putting myself at risk of doing this for 3 more years. So I think that's a nice balance. And then I think if we go to a 3-year term and stagger maybe 1/3 of the council, we still don't have great turnover risk. It's still a lot better than we've got today, but it also cycles everyone through naturally. You wind up on mayoral elections kind of once a decade. You wind up on a mayoral election most of the time you're not. And so it gives us a lot of benefits from not having to worry too much about where are we placing this and doing the initial setup. So I think staggered 3-year terms are the right way to go, but staggered terms are a must. And then one last thought on geographic diversity. I would not say that we're going to do all of the geographies in one cycle. So I wouldn't say let's do all the north side elections at the same time. I would make sure that we spread that out, that we try to have a north side district, a south district, a east district, and a west district kind of come up every year. There's always turnover. There's always an election everywhere in the city, but the new alder has their neighbors we're already there. So thanks, Grant. This is a lot of good stuff. And
thank you, Alder. Thank you for proving there are a gazillion different ways of doing this. As I said to Alder Foster, I wish there was just a right way that we could all just decide. But appreciate the debate discussion. Other people's thoughts on what Alder Foster presented, as well as Alder Paulson's idea about 3 years. Alder Figueroa-Cole.
I don't really have questions about the presentation itself. I mean, I think, thank you so much for all that work. It will be a matter of deciding as a body of 20 which way to go. But I have a question for Attorney Haas, if he has a minute for me. Hello. How does that look? What would that look in an ordinance? Like if we implemented those changes, on the middle of a term or an upcoming term? How does that look if we were going to do the staggered thing?
Well, so as you probably know, changing the terms would take a charter ordinance, and if you were moving to 4-year terms, you may need to initially. The statute does allow the council to create like different classes, so to start the initial staggering. So you could have 2 classes of ordinances or I'm sorry, 2 classes of alders. And next year, say, one class is elected for 2 years, the other class is elected for 4 years. And then in 2 years, that class is elected for 4 years to get yourself on those staggered terms.
So for the first, if you were to try it for the first time, then you have run for 2 years, but then you may find yourself in a 4-year term. Is that what that would look like?
I'm not sure I was following you. Whatever you're elected for, you serve that term, and then eventually all of the 2-year terms will be converted to 4-year terms.
But when we start doing the swapping, let's say we implemented this for the next, for next April, and we decide, like, how do you decide who will go through elections on April, and then you have 2 other years that, you know what I mean, that you will you be elected again for 2 years or 4 years? How would that go?
So all of the alders currently were elected for 2 years, so the term ends next April, right? And so the question, so say you had this in place, you waved a magic wand, it's up to the council to determine then which 10 alders are elected for another 2-year term and which 10 alders are elected for a 4-year term, if that's the way you want to go. Then in 2 more years, in 2025, those alders who are elected for a 2-year term would be up for a 4-year term.
Will there be an election for everybody? An election for 2 years and an election for 4 years?
Right, exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. That's what I was getting at.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
And just to be clear, because this does get confusing, there is no way this would be implemented for the 2023 election because we have to. So you're talking about in 2025, certain people running for 2, certain people running for possibly 4, and then but you'll always run, as Attorney Haas said, in attorney way, you'll always know what you're running for. There'll never be a switch all of a sudden where you're like, hey, I'm all of a sudden here for 4 years. No, when you run, you'll know exactly how many years you're running for, and while you get that staggering going, it will just take a little bit where some people will be running for shorter terms.
Yeah, I mean, I know we mentioned the upcoming one as an example. Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that. Thanks. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Bennett.
Hold the phone. I am so confused. So are we saying that alders are going to now be running, they can decide if they're going to run for 2 or 4 years?
No. If we were go to a staggered system, the council would have to determine how to get there. And so we would say, when this is implemented, these districts will have an election in 2025 for 2 years, but these other districts would have an election for 4 years. So we could get the staggering going. We'd have to figure out. But you're doing that
staggering. Why?
Well, if we decided to go staggering, if we decided that it's not a great idea for the entire council to be up at one time because of turnover, that was the discussion: is staggering a good idea? And if staggering is a good idea, obviously it's going to take a bunch of years to get that in place, and that would be, all up front. Nobody would be surprised. No alder's term would be shortened or extended. Voters would know exactly what they were voting for, and candidates would know, and it would just, we would get that stagger in place. But the only way to do that would be to have some shorter terms while you worked towards that. Looking at grants things probably will help your mind understand a little bit better, but it certainly is complicated. I think the thing to think more than anything is, what is the end goal? What would you like to see as the end goal? And understand, yes, implementation could be complicated, but as a group, we would certainly figure that out.
Okay, I will say I have been thinking about this whole I know this isn't necessarily 4-year terms, but I think it applies here too. The idea of changing anything about how we currently structure our council, I'm just a bit hesitant because we've seen how many alders now? 4 alders leave midterm now. And I don't know how. I think that in and of itself isn't helpful for our government. But also would staggering affect that? Like, what if we have all these alders that are up for re-election, but then on top of that, in like certain districts, their alder leaves midterm. Does that make sense? So if we have like 1 through 10, they're staggered, but then like there's like 4 alders in 7 through or in 11 through 20 that are leaving. So that means we have 14 alders that are like leaving all that at the same time. We could kind of the same effect. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm not sure how that's any worse than the position we're in now. I mean, when 14 alders are up for election, that doesn't mean 14 alders are leaving. Obviously, you talked about vacancies, so those are for people resigning. So sure, there are new alders there, but right now, every 2 years, all 20 of us are up for re-election. And the argument about staggering is saying, is there a benefit to not have the possibility of all 20 of us leaving or being voted out of office and having large amounts of new alders. So what you're describing is no worse than where we are now with all 20. The idea is one, is there value in having longer term lengths, and 2, is there value in not seeing as much turnover because less people are up for election?
I mean, I have opinions about the term limits,
Okay.
But that's not what is up for debate right now.
Yeah, I mean, but it partially is. So if you want to hear what Vice President Curry's questions are and then come back with your opinions, how about we do
my opinions stand. We've had too many alders leave midterm at this point where if we extend this to 4 years, imagine how many alders will leave then midterm.
Thank you. Vice President Curry.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. This is hard because I don't know anything else. So Alder Foster, I have a question. I know a lot of times, especially heading into the referendum, other cities were mentioned as kind of comparing, contrasting, and like larger urban cities that have a higher population from us having less alders. Have you looked at any other bodies that stagger or the like?
I have not done any research around it. There might have. I don't even think there was any research around that specific question as part of TFOGs. I mean, to be honest with you, I bring, I think, like a lens of more just organizational development and having worked in like, corporate business environment, healthcare, in management, et cetera, and just like thinking a lot about HR and how you build teams, and a lot of what I've seen as being a dumpster fire on council is just feels like we're set up for it. Like if you had what business would you say, all right, every 2 years, all employees are like potentially up to be fired or to quit or whatever, and half of them do, and you bring in half of your team is brand new, and you do that every 2 years, plus the people that leave in between. And so it's like, I just don't even think it's, there's definitely a political question, a representation question, but yeah, I think I'm on the same page with Alder Paulson around my biggest focus is around staggering. And I also think moving to the 4-year term allows us an even better opportunity to do that staggering. So yeah, it's more just based, I think, on other experience and not so much on like what other cities are doing.
Sure, thank you. I don't know, part of me feels a little bit, not necessarily not qualified, but still being within my first term. 4 years makes me nervous. And I know that we're working towards bettering infrastructure. We've had staff shortages in the council office. So this and COVID and all. So I shouldn't base it on now, but for instance, I'm thinking about commitments folks make, you know, family changes. 4 years just seems, I'd be more willing. 3 years sounds more digestible. But yeah, I think I'm basing it on now. And we know through conversations, there's been some talks about culture and climate and how that fits in. And I would, for instance, many people asking about first-time alders are going to seek re-election. Thankfully, we don't have to publicly declare that right now, but it's a hard job and you really can't be prepared for it until you're in it. And I would hate for someone to feel frazzled out after 2 years and then resign and like the comments that come with that. So I don't know, it's hard for me without seeing something else, but I am definitely in favor of staggering. I think turning everyone over at the same time, I never thought of staggering, but now that I know that, I'm like, yes, I love this idea. I'm not sold on the 4 years. I'd be more comfortable with 3. But I also know that everything isn't perfect right now for me to have maybe a clearer lens. Oop. And I literally just popped up. Okay, I can mute myself, sorry.
Thank you, Vice President Curry. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you. So I mean, I know that I'm not, based on the experience thus far, you spend a whole year, especially this year where we had so much shortage, not just on the council office, but across the city to just get your resources, you know, in place to get things going. That easily takes a year to get, you know, to get you really immersed on the job. And you all know me, how I go about how crazy I can get into the weeds of things. So it is a lot of hours that some of us put in. So the idea of 3 years versus 4 years, I'm not hung up on that. I do believe it should be more than 2 years. I think that the second year is like you just really getting going, and then you have to start again another campaign and go through all that struggle. So either 3 or 4, fine with me. The question about staggering, I mean, I look at this from the perspective of the board of directors, and I don't see that any different, like, you know, than that scenario. Like Grant was saying, I don't think I ever been on a board of director, neighborhood association, any of those places that have bylaws where things are elections are staggered, because you don't want to lose everybody at the same time. You don't want to have to train everybody at the same time. You wanted to just like have the knowledge and experience within the board as it transitions to new people coming in. And eventually those people move on, and then you have the new people that came in as the experts now, and they can continue to help each other. So definitely for the staggering thing, but I just want to throw out there my input in regards to the terms. Definitely 3 years, 4 years, that it will be better than 2 years, whichever we pick. Thank you. Thank
you. I will say I've been doing this for 4 years and I'm still learning stuff every single day. I think because this is a part-time job, it's very hard to get immersed in this, and I definitely feel like there's a learning curve at some point. Sort of it's exponential, and then you kind of plateau, and then it starts growing again. And so I think there's a ton of value in for it being more than 2 years, and you turn around and all of a sudden run. I do appreciate the comments on 4 years is a very long time to devote to this job. Having done it for 4 years, I agree. This is a life decision that certainly has been interesting for the last 4 years of my life, and I don't know how I would have felt signing up for a full 4 years. So I wish there was a right answer. I'm happy to look into more what other cities do if that would change anybody's mind. But I do, I think also, at some point, we just need to throw something out there and go forward with it. Get more feedback from other council colleagues as well, and then get feedback from the public. But I think it sounds like there's a strong yes to staggering, not really a strong opinion on the staggering intervals. And then kind of unease about either 3 or 4, and then some not thinking that we should even switch from 2. Alder Bennett.
I would not consider myself a strong yes for staggering. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think this was helpful, Grant. Do you feel like you have the perfect path forward?
I'll nail it for sure.
Yeah, so I think
Start working on your substitutes. Just have them ready.
Yeah, so I think Grant has enough to work with. Do people want to? You could just nod your head. Do people want to get? I'm happy to do quick snapshots of what other cities do. I know Hoboken, for example, has six. They have 9 total council people. They have 6 that are in one election and 3 in another. So, and that's they're 4-year terms, and they do stagger them. Do people want to see what some other cities that Hoboken's not Madison? It's hard to compare, but TFOGS does have comparison cities, and they did a really good job. Do people want to see what they're doing? Would that help in this discussion? You can just nod your head yes if you think so. I'm seeing at least one yes, and that's good enough. I'm seeing 2. Thank you, Vice President Curry, for the. All right, cool. I will do a little bit of work on that. I'm going to do a little bit of work for related to other cities. So while I'm doing that, I will grab that info as well. Alder Paulson.
Just when you were digging around in other cities, I'm especially interested in other Wisconsin cities and kind of maximum term lengths, if there are other councils that go out to 4 years.
So Wisconsin, okay.
Right, just nothing wrong with Hoboken, but if you can
no.
You bias your searches a little bit to Wisconsin.
No, Alder Paulson, so we're clear, TFOGS does look at cities that are very much like Madison. Okay. I'm not sure how many of those, I don't recall how many of those are in Wisconsin, but there's a lot of discussion in there about like capital cities with universities, cities our size. John Strange and other people in the city attorney's office worked on that, really did a good profile of cities to compare us with, opposed to looking at random cities like Hoboken or random cities and towns in Wisconsin. So if you have suggestions on other towns in Wisconsin that you'd like me to look at, I'm happy to do that. I can also go with you offline, and when I get the list, I could send you that. And if there are other cities you want, we can certainly add to it. But yes, I'm very focused on trying to be Madison-like cities opposed to just cities I know.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Alder Tischler.
Yeah, my apologies if we've already addressed this. I had to step out for a few minutes. But if we did make any changes, when would they go into effect? How
Sure. So I don't know if anybody. I mean, I think I alluded to that a little bit earlier, but I will say directly. I mean, as Attorney Haas did remind us that we can't do this without voter approval. This would go on the ballot in April 2023 if we decide that's what we would like, and then nothing would change until 2025 because everybody who's going to get elected in 2023 before this question is decided by the public would have to be elected for 2 years. And then in 2025, if we're going to do a stagger, if we're going to do 3 years, 4 years, we'd have to have that, figured out, that staggered system. I also do believe that the referendum would have to probably be clear about what that looks like. And so when we go out to referendum, we're going to tell people starting in 2025, these districts will be for 4 years, but these districts would be for 2 years. And then in 2027, these other districts would be for 4 years. So whatever it is, we will definitely spell that out in the referendum question because I believe we have to literally give people, I would assume, Attorney Haas, I assume that the referendum would have to give the actual language of the ordinance change, which would have to go into that level of detail.
Yep, we'd have to sort of state what the ordinance would be and then ask for a yes or no vote.
Okay, yeah. So all of that would have to be figured out when we go to ballot, broadcast. But implementation-wise, people wouldn't see any difference until 2025. So we'll definitely take a bit to implement. Vice President Curry.
I guess question on that, considering that the 2025 cohort could include some folks that are here today, possibly. If that effect went and changed, voters agreed with it, I'm assuming there wouldn't be flexibility in the ordinance to be like, okay, these folks don't want to sign on for another 4 years. These are the districts we want. Like, we would have to change ordinance in order to do that.
Yeah, we would have to be very clear up front exactly what we're doing. We're going to have to decide by April 2023 what that staggered terms looks like. And then in 2025, if somebody who's sitting here today is thinking about running again and only wants to do it for 2 years, and it turns out their district is assigned to be 4 years, then they wouldn't be able to switch that. They'd have to stick with the 4 years.
Or resign.
Or resign. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think we probably see more special elections. So our vacancies right now we end up filling. So there is some flexibility to to be a little bit more common to see some special elections. So something to at least think about when you're thinking about this. If it is a 4-year term, the council could pick somebody for a shorter period of time and then the voters can fill the remainder of the term. There's certainly ways to do that if we're worried about vacancies and how that's filled, et cetera. All right. Thank you, everybody, for this discussion. This will not be the last time, but look forward to seeing Alder Foster come up with the perfect solution, and I will get some research on what other cities are doing to either refute his perfect solution or give it some additional credit. All right. I failed to mention that we did have 2 people signed up for this. Neither wanted to speak. The registration information was sent, so I'm not going to read it, but alders do have the information on it. They just for the topic, both those people opposed the topic. I'm going to move on to the next item, which is item number 5, which is a substitute establishing a common council prohibited harassment and/or discrimination policy. This item was referred to us by the council. We do have one registered speaker, Bonnie Rowe. We're going to give Bonnie an opportunity to speak, and then once she's done, we will have the chair of that committee give an update and recommendation on what to do going forward when it comes to that item. Bonnie, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. I'm in support of number 5. At first, I thought it odd that this policy on harassment and discrimination would apply to city employees, but not to alders. Why is that? Are alders in a ruling class all to themselves, able to apply the legislation you make to others while exempting yourselves? It's not always easy to play by the rules. One rule I think is healthy in a workplace is to start by believing the best in your colleagues. It is the opposite of rushing to judgment to condemn an alder under your leadership. Going public and saying you are disgusted without even approaching Gary first is appalling to me. I don't condone the group he joined. In fact, I condemn it, and especially the actions of those involved in the January 6th insurrection at our nation's capital. So does Gary. After Gary explained he'd been misled about the group's intent, a common theme among former military as he is, and as the group by the Anti-Defamation League pointed out, when Gary learned more about the group, he left it 2 months after he joined, more than 2 years ago. Have any alders ever seen or heard or read or witnessed any hint of racism or white supremacy on Gary's part? I know him pretty well, and I haven't. Gary is one of the nicest, smartest, most inclusive leaders I know. You lost a great alder. Yet, Chair, you threw him under the bus, one of your own members, and when asked by Gary to denounce the threats, vandalism, and graffiti you incited, you and the mayor, who immediately tweeted the article and said, "I'll just leave this here," with the link to how to run for alder. She even pointed out it was District 17. Alder Bennett publicly called Alder Halverson a Nazi. Do you understand what this does to someone's reputation? You, the leaders of the council, incited harm against Gary, which led to horrible problems for his family. And when asked to denounce it, you, Chair, doubled down. Had this policy been in place for alders, perhaps 2 Black women on the council who very publicly tendered their resignations from the TFOG's work group, quote, due to the lack of leadership from Chair Keith Furman, who has not been leading with equity or practicing inclusive meetings. Maybe they could have had some recourse. They accused you of being unprofessional, but also undermining them as alders, as Black women. In their statement on the city's website, they said, quote, Chair Furman was prioritizing some members over others. and inconsistently applying the rules of the work group. And this indicates that the chair is using his power and privilege to make sure our voices are not valued or considered. I ask you, Chair Furman, to seriously consider tendering your resignation from the council, or at the very least, to step down from leadership. Your leadership is toxic, and it's created an unsafe environment for the council. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Bonnie? Okay. Vice President Curry, can you please update the Common Council Executive Committee on this item?
Sure, thank you, Chair. So the subcommittee of the Common Council Executive Committee to establish a code of conduct has met for 2 meetings since forming and by resolution and having alders join. We have so far reviewed the draft of the anti-harassment and discrimination policy drafted by and previously mentioned by past presidents Abbas and Alder Healy. And knowing that some legwork has been done, not losing sight of some of the things, but really having crucial conversations about whether or not policy should apply just to council or if it should be entered into ordinance and applied to all city public officials and elected officials. We have also reviewed and are searching to add resources to the policy that is established. And in light, we are meeting next on Tuesday, the 20th, before the Common Council convenes. And no, I see Karen shaking her head. No, I believe that is true.
Karen is looking up the date.
Okay, yes. and bringing some actual language to have more robust conversations around, as well as continuing to develop some of the professional development training tools and resources specifically for the body, but also again, in looking that there are city staff, department heads that are also part of these BCCs that the council is really trying to weight the whole gravity of the situation.
Thank you, Vice President Curry. Are there any questions from alders about where about that update and where we are? Okay, so we're going to need a motion on this item. We can either so that this is actually the proposed policy. And so our options are everything from recommending the council approve this at the meeting on 10/11 to placing it on file without prejudice, to referring it to a different meeting, et cetera. Does anybody have a motion? Alder Foster, go ahead.
Just, I guess, a question first to Vice President Curry. I was at the last meeting, and it seemed like not at a point yet to have like a really kind of defined timeline. But so just kind of wanted to confirm that, or if you have a good idea of when you think that would be. I mean, I'd be happy to recommend re-referral, but also don't like doing that to like picking a random date and then having it come up again, and then like each time we're just taking time with it. So I guess I'm just trying to decide. I mean, on the one hand, I mean, obviously the work is moving forward, and I'm really interested to see what the recommendation from your group is. And so I think I'm leaning towards if you don't have a real clear timeline at this point, I would maybe place on file without prejudice so that we're just able to take it up once you guys are done. But if you think that you would have a recommended kind of timeline, then we could instead refer this item to them.
My timeline would have been 2 weeks ago, but considering all things, I don't want to bind us into a timeline. And am striving towards, as the chair, providing a little bit more how do I say this? I'm learning how to navigate being a chair and getting everything in on time. And I feel like we would be done. My goal personally would be before the end of this year, but know that I'm part of a collective. So I would not be opposed to re-referral or even placing on file without prejudice.
Maybe one quick question to Attorney Haas. If let's say we referred it to like February or something, just to sort of be like, conservative, and then the work group comes up with a recommendation by December, is like just legislatively, like, is there a way that we can, obviously with consent of the council, bring it back early? I've never really thought of this before, but is there any obstacle to that? And I just know that when, we put something on file, even without prejudice, people are going to, some people might feel like that's saying no to the thing and not understand, what. So I just don't want to trigger anything there, but also I would be okay with referring far enough out. I just hate having to bring it up again, okay, we'll set it for December, and then we get December, we're not quite ready, and then we refer it again. And each time we're just kind of spending a lot of time on it. So yeah, could we bring it up early if it's ready early?
I had given a lot of thought, but now we have this system of identifying when items are going to come back to the council, but maybe a referral that could be part of the referral as a date in February, but with instructions to have it referred early if the committee is prepared to.
Upon recommendation of the committee, that we would move it up to well, I don't know if it's an order, President, for me, but I would make basically a motion to that effect, that I would say refer to the last council meeting in February, or with instructions to have it referred earlier than that if and when the committee comes up with a recommendation.
Alder Foster, would you want that referred back to here first before it goes back to the council? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so I would say the CCEC meeting associated with the last council meeting in February. Obviously, we haven't set CCEC dates, and we'll announce those dates. But that would be the motion that this body would be recommending for the council to take up on 10/11. Okay, can I get a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Alder Figueroa-Cole. Any discussion on that? Obviously, that was a little bit more complicated than usual. So I don't know if anybody has questions or wants to talk about it, but I think Alder Foster obviously worked through that. Karen, go ahead.
Just a quick clarification about the scheduling. We didn't have something scheduled on the 20th because there had been I believe a special finance meeting that got canceled, but I believe I'm going to look to Vice President Curry to see whether she would like to stick with the schedule, which would be our next meeting would be in October, or if you'd like me to get something on the schedule for Tuesday.
I actually would appreciate and lost sight of that myself. So yes, being okay with moving to take this up at our October meeting.
Great. Thank you, Vice President Curry. Okay, so we have a motion, a second. If there's no further discussion, unless I see otherwise, I'm going to assume unanimous consent. All right, perfect. Next item on our agenda is council office update. Karen did send that out today. It's pretty brief. So Karen, I don't know if you want to quickly summarize it. I'm trying to get away from that, but I don't know. There's some good stuff in there, and you could probably do it pretty quickly. So.
I'd also like to sort of, kind of continuously invite you all to engage at any point you'd like. And hopefully the summaries will give you kind of a sparking point or, starting point for questions or ideas, et cetera, that you can then kind of, go ahead and give while I'm here in the hot seat. So good news, we have a new legislative analyst starting on October 17th. I didn't want to give out too many details because I'm not quite sure where they're at with their closing out their current position, but that's great news and I will have more details soon. Yeah, interviews for the community engagement specialists are underway. I'm so close, so close. I'm very excited about this, and I put down the notes about some of the things to do with them regarding the district reports and so on. Wanted to just let everybody know about the pipe bursting in the council conference room. We're working on it. We've got to figure out some estimates in order to get the insurance claim, but the room is cleaned up and folks can use it. I've been finding some interesting things, and I wanted to just let everybody know that, to go check your inbox rules, mail rules, in case there's something interesting left over from the previous alder. I know some folks had said that they were having some difficulty with emails, and it doesn't, but this might explain some of that. So for anyone who hasn't had a chance to do that yet, I would. Debbie says, thank you very much. She's really noticed that folks have made an effort to provide the 3 weeks notice, and it has made it a lot less onerous for her to be able to work on all these different things at the same time and make sure everybody gets what they need and deal with last minute hiccups and so on and so forth. So she says, thank you. And we thank you very much. And you saw the calendar invites for trainings. Please remember that the de-escalation training is a two-parter. So sign up for a part 1 and a part 2. The active shooter response training is a 1-part training. And then, I thought it would be nice to sort of highlight some of these trainings that are coming up. I've been involved in some of them. I'm going to be involved in others. And I certainly would love to have a conversation with any of you if you do take one. And let me know what you think from the perspective of an alder and so on and so forth, because, and I would just, or even just to have a conversation about the content. I invite you all to do that with me, so.
Thank you, Karen. Alder Foster.
Thanks, Karen. Just one quick question on the de-escalation training. It's okay to mix an in-person and a virtual if that works better schedule-wise. Is that correct? Are they going to be like, it's going to be the same part 1 and stop at the same point? Because that's my plan. And if not, maybe it could be, or maybe I will not go to one of the parts.
This has come up a couple times now, and I have it on my list. I would like to just talk to the facilitator to have her sort of prepare for that, because I feel, my preference is I want it, even if you miss a piece or you double up on a piece of it, I'd rather see folks be able to come than not, even if it's not perfect. So I'm going to let her know that that's what's happening, and she can kind of prepare for that. And I imagine it won't be seamless, because how things go in person and virtual, the discussion is different, and you know how that goes. So, but
I can handle that. I just wanted to make sure that they expect that we're basically starting at the same point for part 2 in either case, and I can handle the rest of it. Thank you. Yeah,
I was definitely thinking I would just, go ahead and give her that heads up, because I don't want to discourage anybody from taking it. So thank you.
Doing doodles is incredibly hard, and I know Karen worked so hard getting that doodle sent and done and figured out and coordinated with the training staff, et cetera. So I appreciate Alder Foster doing what I assume sounds like others are doing too, just trying to figure out what works best, and certainly work on trying to make sure that the instructor knows that's coming. All right. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for that update. If there's no other questions, I wanted to spend a few minutes, just a few very brief minutes, talking about future agenda items. Unfortunately, this is our last CCEC meeting for a month. Our CCEC meeting for the next council meeting was canceled a little bit ago because I foolishly scheduled it on a Jewish holiday, which as somebody Jewish should have known better. And so I apologize for that. There was a weird issue with my calendar not listing everything. So we did cancel that. So we will not have a CCEC meeting going into the 10-11 meeting, but we will have a CCEC meeting on 10-19 for the 10-25 council meeting. There's another CCEC meeting in October for 10-27. And I will say to all alders on CCEC, I sent out a doodle to do a special meeting to fill the vacancy that occurred today. So if you can go ahead and respond to that doodle as quickly as possible so we can get information out to the public and get it on people's calendars, that'd be great. At our meeting on the 19th, right now, I have penciled in a request from Alder Foster on talking about an Alder salary budget amendment. We are going to, Karen's been doing a lot of work on work plans, and I think we're going to talk about that and try to get some feedback on both the office work plan and our chief of staff work plan, and start to do the oversight, more of the oversight role that CCEC was given, and some of the ordinance changes. So that way Karen knows what we're looking for, and we know what she's doing. So really appreciate the work that Karen's been putting in to try to get that to be in a place that will work for all of us to have a good discussion about. It's possible we'll be talking about BCC reorganization at that meeting on the 19th. I do think I'll probably have a proposal back based on our feedback about honoring resolutions. And there is another thing floating around is to talk more about what to do about conferences, conference reports, which is part of our policy. If you go to a conference, you're supposed to come back and report that to Common Council Executive Committee. And I'd like us to talk about if that's the best way to handle that. So those are some of the things floating around. I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that. Alder Foster, you're unmuted. Does that also mean you have a question or a thought, or just unmute yourself? Okay. Any thoughts on future agenda? You certainly don't need to tell me today. I'm not going to do the agenda until a day before the meeting, just to drive Karen a little insane. No, we'll have the agenda about a week before. And you can certainly send me a note if there's something that comes up that you think should be on that agenda that we didn't talk about tonight, but also happy to hear tonight as well. Karen, go ahead.
Not sure if you wanted to raise the issue of the 2023 meeting dates at all. I really am nervous about that.
Yep, and I meant to. So as part of this future agenda item, I've gotten a lot of mixed feedback from people on what to do about CCEC. We've got 5 meetings we need to schedule in 2023 for this CCEC term. I don't think I'm inclined to help to tell the next Common Council president when to do it. I personally have found a ton of value in not having this before council meetings, and so would like to continue with that throughout my CCEC term as president. The next council president can decide how they want to place that. People have strong preferences about, Karen said one of the best times is probably Tuesday. I know Alder Bennett has shared some feedback with me. I know other alders have shared some feedback with me about dates and conflicts, et cetera. It's really hard scheduling this meeting. I do want to share one idea that was being thought of and trying to be put in place when we were thinking about this, was to, and we have not put this in place and we haven't talked about this in much detail, this is a November agenda item, is really having this meeting to be a place where we could talk more about the council agenda. I really don't love the idea that the council president gets to decide if with consent from the VP on pulling an item or trying to figure out some of the timing of items. And I really wanted the Common Council Executive Committee to be more involved in that. Karen made a suggestion that we do Tuesdays for the Common Council Executive Committee. And I just wanted to point out, if we did that, it'd be unlikely that we would have much of a robust discussion about the agenda. The first agenda draft doesn't come out until Wednesday. So just a heads up. Again, this is one of those things where there's no right answer. I'm going to upset a bunch of people on whatever date I pick. But if we pick the date soon, maybe we can convince other committees not to use those dates. Alder Foster.
Yeah, I guess I would push us a little bit to, and maybe it's even a topic for the next meeting. But I think it would be, if I were an incoming president, VP, of all the things that need to happen, figuring out CCEC dates, I think we should get some on the books and actually have that conversation about, does Tuesdays make sense or whatever, like do that on behalf of the next CCC, and then the chair is completely, able to do whatever they want. So they can just cancel those and recreate them. So I don't think we would take anything away, but I think it would be a help to not have to do that. And especially, in particular, like the first couple after the election of new president, et cetera, like I know, there's some really just being thoughtful about the timing of all of those things and setting up the next president and CCEC to be off to a good and quick start is something I'd really like to try and at least offer. And again, they can refuse it and do whatever they want. So I guess I think it would be a worthwhile half hour or whatever it ends up being to kind of, and maybe we could have just, here's option A and option B of, meetings after the, for the next term. have a conversation to get something out there, get them on the books, and at least they've got a starting point.
Thank you, Alder Foster. I certainly can provide those dates and have a little bit longer discussion. Karen did send me the summary of other committees and when they meet. That is available, and so I could do a little bit of mapping and show conflicts and have people be unhappy with whatever date I pick. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I wrote down, I tried. I wrote down everybody's committees, and then I wrote down when those committees traditionally meet. And then I saw that there's somebody's committee being represented by every day except for the Tuesdays opposite the council meetings or Fridays. We have Fridays. So that is how, what? Come on. So that is how I came to that conclusion, is that really we've got conflicts across the board with this group in their committees. So just so you know, yeah, it's a tough spot. Yeah.
Now that you've taken credit for all that work, now I can't take credit for all that work. I will I will get that information from Karen and we'll provide it and see. I mean, I really do appreciate a lot of alders that have figured out how to make time for this meeting. I know Alder Bennett left another meeting to come here today, and I twisted her arm and really appreciate that she did that, and appreciated her contributions to our discussions tonight. So this is not an easy thing to figure out, but we can have a longer discussion about that at the next meeting. And I will within the next week or two have an email out to everybody so you can actually really take it in before the next meeting, and not just be presented at the next meeting with what it is, and see if we can come to some sort of consensus, which will not be the right answer for everybody, but we'll figure something out. All right, thank you, everybody. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion.
Move adjournment.
Can I get a second?
Second.
I've got multiple seconds. Karen, you can take whoever you want. Alder Figueroa Cole verbally, Alder Bennett and Vice President Curry with their fingers. Alder Bennett, you said you were going to unmute yourself and you didn't. Seeing no discussion, I'm going to, as long as there's no objection, I'm going to assume anonymous consent and wish everybody a happy good evening.
Bye. Night all.